fanboys and fangirls. Welcome back to Random Fandom, the podcast that celebrates all things pop culture and fun and good in the world. I'm Shiri, and with me as always, my co-host Chen. Hi Chen.
Hi Shiri.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, since you've asked, I've got a bit of a cold. I'm going to be a little hoarse today. But I think I'm going to make it to the end of the show. I've got faith.
That's very promising. By the time this episode, comes up, I might be very close to you.
I know, you're coming home. Very exciting. We're going to be able to make a few of these shows while together in the same room for a change.
Yes. Way less technical issues,
easier
one can hope.
to schedule as well. But I'm very excited. Okay, so what else? This show will be dedicated to the beautiful side of fandoms. You know what happens when fans just harness the power of community and use it for good. You know, to be the change they want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. And in short, we're going to talk about positive activism in fandoms, small things, big things. Fans can make real change, and that's amazing just by the power of their beliefs and their passion for the thing that they love.
Be the Leslie Knope of everything you do.
Exactly. That's such a good life motto. Though I could never...
Oh, yeah. You can never live up to Leslie Knope. That's not possible.
No, all those binders and stickers, I can't do it.
That's actually totally my thing.
I'll be Ben. I'll be the Ben Wyatt of the world.
Clamation. Do clamation.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay, so we're gonna go right ahead and start with the roundup. Top of the news past few weeks and since our last show, it's all about the wave of men and women coming forward to expose sexual violence that's been done to them in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. All that's still going strong. Very brave people are putting finally, their life on the line, or their jobs on the line, and trying to get this all out in the open. And some amazing things are happening regarding that.
Yeah, there's power in numbers, and people understand, well, every revolution starts with a spark. But I think the Weinstein thing was really, a match to light that spark. And now people understand, at least for the time being, people understand that they can come forward and it's relatively safer for them to do so. So there's definitely, I think, a feeling of community.
Well, I hope so for them. I know there's always a backlash and it's brutal, but yes, if you're being, if you're being rallied around and celebrated, your bravery celebrated, and people finally see you, that's a very strong thing, and it's so crucial to healing. So this is all good. And also, I think when people see that there are consequences, that this is sort of a climate where if someone is exposed, it can be really detrimental to their work and their life.
Yes.
We've seen in the past few weeks actors leading roles in TV shows and movies actually, getting some... I'll say it again, consequences for their actions in the form of losing jobs, which is unheard of.
That's the one thing that makes me optimistic. I'm both curious to see where this is headed.
First one was, of course, Kevin Spacey lost his leading role in a very big hit show, House of Cards. And who would have thought that would happen?
Yeah, and more than that, he was there was a whole thing because he also shot a film, and they recast the role, and they're basically digitally
removing him from the movie.
They're not even digitally. They're gonna reshoot all these scenes, and because the rest of the rest of the cast cares so much that they agreed to give their time, in order to still have
Yeah.
the movie come out at the exact same date, but with someone else and not Kevin Spacey. It's pretty.
So they're reshooting his scenes again.
Yeah.
That's for a movie. That means time, shooting days, getting all the cast, getting all the crew. That's a lot of money being
Yeah.
poured into that.
And
So for Hollywood, that's a huge thing.
yeah, absolutely. And then there's Jeffrey Tambor, who just exited Transparent. And, you know, it's probably number one on the call sheet. He's the star of the show. And I'm saying exited. It was his choice to leave, but it was very clear behind the scenes that if he wouldn't have made the choice, it would have 2 days later he would have been fired. You know.
Take that. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like, you know, when it comes to House of Cards, people are saying maybe it's the female's lead time to shine. Robin Wright, maybe, you know, by him not being there, it might actually also pave the way for her to, you know, she's gonna be the lead.
Yeah,
and
fill in that space.
absolutely. And the same was said about Transparent. There was a call in the LGBTQ community to maybe cast an actual, you know, transgender woman.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to take over his role, do basically a recast. And I think it's really interesting because, you know, he said at some point, I think, but also some people.
Yeah, give more trans women roles as trans women.
Yeah, he said
it while he was getting his award, I think, an Emmy. What did he get for the role?
I think he got an Emmy,
Golden Globe.
but what I'm trying to say is, he said, and other people mentioned it again this week, that if that role would have been cast today, and it would have been given to a cis male, there would have been a lot of backlash. So that goes to show you how even like a 4 or 5 years different, like how it's such a difference in like 5 years. Like today, and he's right, like if you would have cast that role today and it would have not been a transgender woman, that would look really bad. And that, you know, the sexual harassment things aside, that shows some progress in terms of representation, because it's true, because we wouldn't have accepted him today, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think he would still be cast, and it would be okay. There could have been backlash. People would, you know, get angry about it. It's not. I think he would still. The show would be okay. You know what I mean?
I know, but things are changing. You know, Ryan Murphy's in town now in New York shooting a pilot that I think 70% of the cast is transgender women. Like, you know, I don't know. Today, when you have a character that's trans and it's not, you know, and it's not being portrayed by a trans actor or actress, then with the time of tolerance, I think, is over. Because to begin with, most of the audiences for these shows are, you know, what we'll call like liberal audiences, and liberal audiences get pissed now when things like that happen.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Well, hopefully that is the trend. That more than a trend, it's the movement.
Yes. So it's not the moment; it's the movement.
Exactly. Thank you. I was trying not to quote Hamilton.
I don't
but
care.
I failed. It's not the moment.
I failed.
It's the movement. And you know what? It's not the moment. It's the movement. That's what I wish for all this sexual assault discussion.
Yeah. I know you're a bit more pessimistic.
You know what?
But
I am a bit more pessimistic just because I've been sort of working in this world for a long time. You know, I've been 11 years in this day-to-day, working and talking to people who are suffering from PTSD, from sexual assault, are hurt. And so I said that's my red button issue. I get very emotional and upset with every name that comes up these days. Like every day it's someone new that I respected and admired. Oh no, he's a jerk. You know, at best he's a jerk, at worst he's a sexual predator. And it's very disheartening. And it reminds me, you know what it reminds me of? The Joss Whedon Thing, which we started this whole Random Fandom podcast talking about.
yeah.
And that was just a few months ago. Joss Whedon, who was so near and dear to our hearts, major person in my life. I can't forgive him, but that's besides the point. But what I'm saying is, we talked about it at length, And it was like a few weeks before this whole sexual assault shitstorm started. So if it had come up even a few weeks after, no one really talks about it. The fans got really upset about it for a while, but nobody really gave it that much. You don't hear about it.
Yeah.
I understand that people don't care about Joss Whedon the way they care about maybe other people with higher profile, but in the climate that we are in right now, if this would have broken, this news, this whatever,
this item about him,
someone would have written exactly articles, someone would have gone back looking into who were the women that he was with. Were some of them employees of him? Of course they were. They were actresses on his show, so he was the boss.
But at the very least, there was abuse of power. But you said it back then too when we were recording episode 1 that you're hoping beyond hope. It only remains accusations of douchebaggery, and we'll never find out that it's more than that. And you're saying now, if it would have come out a few weeks later, even during this shitstorm, people would go and dig deeper. I'm not sure.
Someone
would have
it's not gone looking for consent.
I'm not sure it's not happening. And
maybe, okay.
And even with Harvey Weinstein, they collected evidence for so long before they finally broke the story. I don't know where this whole thing is going. I hope, like you said, it's very disheartening. It's very disappointing. It's like, is there no good men left on earth? So I hope people are definitely digging deeper now.
That's true. We get some examples of things that, I'll give you one more example. A couple of years ago, there was the whole Johnny Depp thing. He was very violent and abusive to his then wife, Amber Heard. He was charged with domestic abuse allegations. There was this whole thing. There were witnesses. There was footage of it. And yet, she was accused of being a liar, an opportunistic woman, and blah, blah, blah. No consequences for him. This sort of just kind of went away. I'm talking about in regards to us, the consumers. Mm-hmm. And now finally, just the past few weeks, I'm starting to hear some backlash for him. There's a growing demand from fans to recast Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp's role in Fantastic Beasts 1, where he was in the very end, like for a second, they showed him as a character that will play a bigger part in the second movie. The fans are demanding that they digitally remove him from those final seconds of the first movie and completely recast the second movie. Not support him. And I find this to be very encouraging because I feel that this sort of thing in the past should be looked at again. We used to give such passes to people just because they were talented or beautiful or rich and famous and powerful in the industry. So many people just got by, even though the stories about them everyone knew about,
Mm-hmm.
That's how Bill Cosby operated for years and years. So, I'll be optimistic when people like Woody Allen or Roman Polanski when I start hearing people rejecting them and not working with them. Because it still seems like if Woody Allen calls you to work with him, you don't need a script. Actors say that all the time. I don't get the script. I don't even care what the movie is about. I don't care who else is casting it. If Woody Allen wants me for a movie, I'm gonna go. Why?
And Ellen Page.
Other than Susan Sarandon, who said point blank, that man is a sexual predator. I'm not gonna. No one should work with him.
I mean,
who else?
I'm ambivalent about Susan Sarandon, but I will mention Ellen Page. She wrote a very heartfelt post a couple weeks ago. She mentioned the biggest regret of her career is doing a Woody Allen movie. So, and by the way, I don't know if you heard about it because that's relatively recent, but I don't know if you know Danny Masterson. He was Hyde in that 70s show.
Yeah.
There are allegations against him now, and he's a Scientologist, and there's a whole big drama about how the LAPD sides with have some sort of agreement with Scientology, so they are helping claims within Scientology to vanish. It's the whole thing is just very messed up.
Well, the Scientology is a whole other issue of
Yes,
crazy,
which we will
crazy.
definitely not go.
We will not go into that.
Yeah.
That's like a nest of crazy. But let's say I'm not. It doesn't surprise me that they have their hand in the, stirring the pot.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to conclude, I'm still a bit skeptical about all this being, relevant in the future. You said to me before, you can see changes happening in Hollywood, but not really in politics.
Yeah, I mean, we have a president who's sexually harassed many women over the years, and he's the president of the United States. So, yeah, and you were mentioning how, right now it's a right-wing, left-wing kind of thing.
I'm just thinking that Hollywood and the whole industry of entertainment is more left-wingish. Also, they like to cover their asses and, make money. So if this is what's happening, they're going with that. But also, I believe that there are good people there that, they are liberals mostly. So that helps. In politics, I'm talking about, of course, United States politics right now. Politics in the United States right now are very right-wingy, not as open and liberal. And like you said, the president is setting such an example of, everything can go fuck itself. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. No consequences. Anything goes. So
let's not talk about that orange man. It's just like I get so upset.
Okay.
So.
But also the justice system is not getting any better. So I'm thinking the change needs to happen in a lot of places, but it's going to have to happen in places like politics and the justice system, which is still broken and allows people who have done these horrible things to walk free or do minimum of jail time, if at all. Who still give the people who come forward to complain, they give them the message that you better shut up. Just shut up. Just keep it to yourself. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know about your pain and your suffering and your shattered lives. So
I'm laughing because before we started recording this podcast, you were like, this is so close to my heart. I know I'm gonna,
rant?
Begin a whole speech, and I have to stop myself from making a speech, and it sounds so much like a speech
Absolutely.
Right now. On both of us. So we're doing great.
I said let's do this very, very short. It's just like two sentences in the beginning of the roundup. We still haven't gotten the roundup. Okay, so you know what? Let's wrap this up. Everybody knows that's not over yet. So let's move right along to happier things and do the roundup.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yes.
We need a theme.
One of the things that
we need a theme, a bit of a theme.
We need a what?
We need a little jingle.
A theme?
For getting us into the... I'm gonna work on that. Roundup!
Sounds good. We usually just do a verbal, segue. So speaking of running towards a different subject, I want to talk about Runaways.
That's where I put it. I insert it. I'll work on it. Okay.
All right.
Do the segue.
So I want to say the first 3 episodes of Runaways, Marvel's Runaways, premiered on Hulu in the US. I really liked the series, the comic book series, when I was younger. I think I have few of the paperbacks back home in Israel. And, I don't remember it super well. I remember, major plot points, so I could tell when things were different. But overall, I watched the first 3 episodes, and I thought it was a very solid adaptation, not shying away from the darkness that exists in the books, and it's definitely dark, not shying away from, the gay character is gay, and, that's always promising. There's so much potential there. Like, I'm really looking forward. I think what they're gonna do is release 3 episodes a week every week, but I might be wrong about that. I guess we'll find out. So I definitely recommend it. I mean, if you enjoy the Marvel shows, if you enjoy superheroes, this one is like a bunch of teenagers, but that doesn't mean that it's not good. I think there's this always this thought that if it's a teenager show or if like the characters are teenagers, yada yada yada. Yeah, it also has 2 Latin American women in the lead cast, like 2 of the teenagers. I believe one of them is 14.
Wow.
So it's just it's so good for the society to just see this representation so early on. So in terms of diversity, in terms of inclusiveness, I know you wanna ask me about what was the term that we find for overweight
Body positive.
a plus actress. Yeah, no, but I mean like the term for like plus actress, right?
Yeah,
that's
but
the term that we
you know,
heard people use.
you don't have to use it.
You don't like it very much?
I don't know why you have to label it. And I'm not averse to
It's
just saying
interesting.
fat people, because I don't think being fat
I
is
know, but many people are.
inherently bad. That's the thing. We have to stop
Of course.
thinking that the being fat is bad. So if you're gonna say fat, you're thinking it. Just say it. But if you want to say
But I
plus
think
actress,
the thing is, I'm not a plus actress, so how I feel about it doesn't really matter. What matters is how a person I'm talking to who is a plus actress would, react to different terms. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's the minority's place to coin its own kind of like
I
term.
get it.
Because
I think that the plus thing comes from modeling. There was just models once,
Like
and
plus
then there
size?
was a demand for plus size, so it's plus size, so plus models.
Yeah.
And now plus actress. What does that mean? When she loses weight, she's not a plus actress anymore. So it's not a category. It's bullshit. So I don't like it. It's just an actress.
all right,
Let's be body positive about it.
I don't know to speak of body positivity just yet. Not everybody in this cast is like the thinnest person in the world. Like, they're all pretty, of course, but but it's very early on, so I'll definitely very excited to see where it's headed. Very excited to see how they'll handle some of the twists that are in the comic book, because it's a completely different format, so the whole time frame can be changed. Like, they were already talking about some things that they had a bit more time to play around with, because the comic book is something you read way quicker, So, and we talked about how they actually started a new title of the Runaways that kind of like just started coming out with Rainbow Rowell at the helm of it, which is actually curious. I need to. It's always weird because if you're like loyal to the old generation, it's weird. But it's actually interesting to see how the decade or so would affect that creation nowadays, how it would look nowadays as a comic book title, because on TV we see how it looks
And
nowadays.
she's amazing,
But,
so we can trust her. Rainbow.
She's amazing. I'm actually finally reading Carry On.
Yay, finally.
Such a weird experience. I keep changing my mind about how I feel about it every single day. I'm about 42% in. I know it's pretty accurate, but it's because I'm reading it on my Kindle. So that's like a respectable chunk of the book. It's
You
like,
didn't even get to the good parts.
I don't.
Wait for it.
Fine, wait for it. As of now, it's weird because, obviously it's, I always knew it would be in terms of like a Harry Potter ripoff.
Should we just explain what it is? This thing that is one of my
Sure.
fandoms?
I don't remember if we talked about it. I don't remember if we talked about it in the past, but
Okay,
go
I'll
ahead,
try to
yeah.
be brief.
It starts
I'll
with
try to be brief.
Fangirl, which I think, by the way, I made you read
Fangirl, you
originally.
did. You told me about it. I didn't.
Yes.
Had no idea about it. So that was the first Rainbow book I read. And then I read
Yes.
Eleanor and Park, which is one of the best books ever. Very recommended. But that's not besides the point. Okay, so she wrote a book that's called Fangirl. We love it already. And it's about these 2 twins that go off to college, and basically it's about one of the twins who is more shy and introvert, how she struggles to fit into life at college, And she is the writer of fanfiction. Her big fandom is the Simon Snow books, which is pretty much a Harry Potter type thing. Actually, it is Harry Potter, just without saying the words Harry Potter and giving it new names and just changing the details just a little bit so it won't be flat out Harry Potter. But when she wrote it, Rainbow Rowell knew that everybody knows that she's referring to Harry Potter, okay? So
Yeah, and just to clarify, so people don't think that it sounds lame just because of how we're saying it. That's the thing, that the whole fan fiction writing thing, it's just a very tiny tool of what the book is really about, which is the girl. So it's like you're very forgiving towards the fact that it's very clearly Harry Potter, because that's not the point of the book.
I'm fine with it. I think it's a story about a girl that is just like me. She's a fangirl. She writes fan fiction. No one really wrote about that type of person in that way. I loved it for that reason alone. For me, it was the major. It's a good
Absolutely.
book anyway. Everything else that goes on, very, very good and
Yeah.
well written. But the part about where the fan fiction and canon start getting all twisted up in each other, I love that, because if you think about it, it's kind of a meta thing. We have
Of
she's
course, of
obviously
course.
Rainbow loves Harry Potter, and this is kind of a book that celebrates Harry Potter because she made
It's a love song, I think, for
yes.
fans in general, for people who write fan fiction. And so, one of the themes that was really important to me in the book is like, I'm not going to get into details, but there's always a discussion of whether or not you're a real writer if you write fan fiction. And, it's something that does come up in the book. It's like, it's not your characters, it's not your setting, so you're not a real writer. And I think, the more, mainstream fan fiction becomes, and, we're actually getting there.
Yeah.
People recognize the fact that fan fiction writers, yes, so they are using someone else's characters and they are using someone else's setting. Not always, but again, we'll get to that when we talk about fan fiction. But you need to know the characters so well to write for them, and coming up with a whole new story for these characters, it makes you a writer. So that's something that really, really spoke to me when I read the book as a writer myself, of both fan fiction and original material, of how people used to belittle fan fiction or still do. And that's definitely something that matters to me a lot, that I really like that the book
That's
touched
what I
upon.
said that's what I meant when I said I saw myself in it, because that's the kind of story you don't really get. But that's a very good discussion to have about what is fan fiction and just by writing this book and bringing it into the mainstream, she made great strides in for fan fiction to be brought into the mainstream.
Absolutely.
I did this whole lecture in a con a couple of years ago about fan fiction in the mainstream, and that was a major part of it, the whole Fangirl Carry On thing. That was just before Carry On came out.
But you want to tell us about
Yeah,
Carrie?
sure.
Yeah.
All that is just Fangirl. So she is a writer of a fic that is very, very popular. People read it, like thousands of people read it every day. And in the book, there's parts of that fic. And her ship is not the canon ship of her fandom. It's a slash ship. What happened after Rainbow Rowell finished writing Fangirl, the world of Simon Snow, this pseudo fandom, was still alive in her head, and she couldn't let it go. So what she did is write Carry On. Carry On is a separate, completely separate book that's basically Simon Snow, his adventures, his world. It's a bit like it has very strong connection to Harry Potter. You can see the Harry Potter in it, but she made it her own, and she did. Absolutely, I think she did amazing in creating a magical world that is a bit different, that works a little different. Her characters are awesome, and her ship is still slash, only this time it's canon, and that is amazing. And I love them, and I love this book. That's it.
I would say, yeah, okay. I was gonna say semi-spoiler, but not really. Yeah. Our argument about whether or not something is a spoiler or not are amazing. This is why I'm on the fence. It's the moments, part of it feels like she's mocking the very mockable things about Harry Potter, like how angsty he is, that I love. Some moments I'm like, would the character really? I don't know. So, stay tuned. I'm definitely enjoying the general reading experience. I just don't know in what ways yet. So,
Okay.
we'll
I
see.
think it's a lot like Harry Potter, where in the beginning of the book nothing really happens. Then you say to yourself, okay, is there going to be a plot today? And then, like in the last 40% of the book, everything happens. And
Yeah, it's not even that. I think for me, it's more of like a characterization thing. But the more I read, the more I'll have the right words to describe
okay,
exactly.
we'll talk about it again.
But I think one of the things we mentioned was that it's really cool, and that's another whole discussion of like almost like a fandom crossover when you have a creation, when you have like the mother creation, the anchor creation, and from that creation, other branches kind of like, and in a way, Carry On is a spin-off of Fangirl, in a way.
Yeah.
And that actually really, something really cool that happened this past week is that Jane the Virgin, which I hope you'll watch one day, I think you'd love it.
I started watching it. I didn't get far.
Well, we talked about how, like, things, sometimes it's about timing. Maybe it will come back to your life at some point.
I doubt it. It's too much of a soap opera for me. I don't
Well,
like
yeah.
it.
It's a telenovela that
It's
mocks
very sweet.
telenovelas.
I know, it's very sweet, but it is at its heart a telenovela, which I have trouble with. But it's very sweet.
Yeah, well, it's sweet to a point, and then some bad things happen. So, anyways,
Okay.
bad things happen, gay things happen. It's pretty great. Yeah, but what I was gonna say, that Jane, ever since episode 1 of the show, wanted to be an author. And finally, 4 seasons in, she becomes a published author. And this last week, Simon and Schuster, or like one of their companies, they released the book that throughout the show you've been seeing her writing, I think over the last couple of seasons. So the viewers would know. Yeah, it's super cool. The viewers would know the characters, and they would know the general arc and setting. And, they even used the term magical realism, which was said on the show a few times in relations to the book. And I think it's in their press release. So it's very much... I think Jane fans would probably... I haven't read it yet. But I think Jane fans would... It's almost like, when it's a creation to accompany the show. So that's really cool. And I think that's actually the last thing we wanted to say in our super short roundup.
Yeah, we made it long.
Yeah.
We managed to do it.
As always. Shiri's like, will we have enough stuff to talk about? I'm like, yep. We always
Never
do.
a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get on with the
show.
Our main thing.
Yeah. The main story of tonight. We want to talk about the different, I don't even know how to call it. I guess the different aspects of what I like to call fandom activism. I think it's a really cool term. And we talked about how there are different ways to go about it. Even within this huge thing that's called fandom activism, there are like different ways of how you see people being active. I guess the simplest is like when fans gather together to collect money for a goal that looks really important to them. And one of the biggest examples, and if you somehow did not watch The 100 season 3, even though everybody who hasn't watched the show knows about it, so this is your cue to go, but this is from 2 years ago. One of the characters, one of the most popular characters to ever grace TV, I think, died on the show. And she was a queer character, so that was a whole different discussion about tropes that we're not gonna get into today. But so many fans were so heartbroken that they raised something like $171,000 for the Trevor Project, which is a charity that helps LGBTQ youth in danger. Suicide prevention, all sorts of stuff like that. So we're talking about strangers who, like you and me, talking on the internet, talking on Tumblr, talking on Twitter, and they just like gathered in masses to raise that ridiculous amount of money. That was almost like specifically in retaliation to something, again, very specific, but the outcome of it was insane. And
What was the outcome?
so I'm saying like 100.
Oh, the money raised.
Yes, I mean many. You can argue that there are other outcomes, but
They
they're
didn't
not.
succeed in their what they wanted to accomplish.
I
mean-
don't know about that because there was a whole petition by showrunners that was people signing that they will never kill a character for these and these reasons, and there was a crazy media coverage for this whole thing in papers like the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, like the biggest industry magazines. And that was also what birthed Klexicon, which is like I would say it's like a pop culture convention for LGBTQ women to have as a safe space. And Klexicon is again a whole different issue, which I hope we'll touch upon soon in one of our future episodes. But you can say that there started a whole movement called LGBT fans deserve better, and it's a pretty active website to this day that they publish news and statistics, and they and Klexicon itself, by the way, works with charities. So all these things that came out from that event on the 100 were kind of like transformed into this very activistic sort of, I don't even know if activistic is a word, but you know what I mean, like, turned into something that is more of a movement. And you definitely see it nowadays all over social media, all over the internet. And that for me is a very big example of what happens when like fandom kind of like bands together. But I think we've seen other examples too. For example, I've seen fans who create their own auctions for certain goals. So one of the famous ones is called Cancer Gets Lost, and it's a woman named Jo. She lost her friend to cancer, and they were both huge Lost fans. So for for years now, I think every other year she does an auction, and she travels all over the US. She would get items, she will get them signed at cons by the actors, and it used to only be Lost, but nowadays you can find like Agent Carter, and you can find like items from the 100 and shows.
Yeah, I was wondering if Lost is still a thing. That's interesting.
For some people, for some people it is.
Listeners, if you are fans of Lost, I would love to hear all about that. That's just fascinating to me. The longevity of a fandom. Yeah.
A fandom.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Carry on.
No, that's okay. Carry on. That's our new, So like I said, she's traveling to conventions, and I think fans are so into it now that I almost always see her tweet about fans who donated signed items that they got for her. Or, for example, many fan artists will submit fan art, like beautiful sketches and stuff, and she'll take these and get them signed. And then the auction, fans, when they're invested, they are willing to pay a lot of money for the things they love.
That's true.
Yeah, so like obviously the signatures and the fact that it's like an exclusive item or something like that, or like a limited edition item, it ups the worth of it. So we're talking here about like really great sums of money for really great causes. And, and you start to see it more and more often. Like someone I've seen on Twitter a few months ago, someone was auctioning Converse shoes with characters with a super popular ship for a specific cause that mattered to them. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's also like something that people see more and more. But I think another cool thing is when actors sort of like kind of do a call to action for their fans for all sorts of charities that are close to their hearts. And I think one of my favorite things with I love the 100, so we're like sticking to it, is Eliza Taylor, who's like the lead actress of the 100. She tried to establish a school in Thailand, and they had issues with their building because they were renting the building and the rent went high, and they wanted to actually buy a building to have a permanent school and afford tuition for more students in Thailand. So she raised the money with fans, and I think it's tricky because going back to like auctions, for example, I think sometimes actors, they sign an item and they don't necessarily know it goes for an auction. And I think there's I don't know, the whole thing is complex, like we said, there's positive things and negative things about everything. But for example, I think when you're part of a fandom and you see everybody around you donating to someone's cause, there's like some sort of like peer pressure to also donate and be vocal about it. Like, I donated a few times to things that I believe, but I never tweeted about it, and I almost feel like people were judging me for not donating without even knowing that I did. You know what I mean? It's like,
Really?
yeah, I think there's like a set of rules, like Twitter rules. It's like, if you're donating, be vocal about it, and it's very tricky because sometimes you think people are only doing it to get on someone's good side, But if we're sticking to the positive things, I think it's beautiful, and just seeing the history of things people raised money for is quite incredible. Javier, who, I can't say his last name, who who created The Middleman, also wrote for The 100. he was selling items from, because he used to write for Lost, and he was selling some exclusive items from Lost that were part of his personal collection to raise money for Puerto Rico after the the hurricane. And you see Lin-Manuel Miranda constantly like raising funds for,
Yeah, true.
yeah, but this is it, like, when we're talking about like how you're kind of like gathering your fans and kind of like using them in a way, but for good. It's not the right term, using them, but kind of like gathering together, sticking together, directing the mutual effort towards like something.
Directing the passion to a productive place.
Yeah.
Because, fans can spend so much time and money on their fandom, being creative, writing, making art, but also just talking about it, watching it, going to conventions, doing just a lot of time that could be used in a lot of time and money instead of, buying, I'm sorry to say it, but another DVD box set of a new release, like, Buffy comes out for the 20-year anniversary. Another box set of Buffy on DVD, which nobody uses anymore. I have 2 already. I'm not going to put my money there to go to Fox or whoever is releasing it. I would rather put my money into causes. And if the person that is at the helm of this fandom directs me to the cause that they care about, I start to care about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the best example of that, maybe no longer because of things, but Joss Whedon is a great example of that. Because since the beginning of time, the beginning of the Whedon fandom, he was very political and vocal about women's rights. Everything I say now, I just wanna chuckle and put asterisks on everything. So I'm not gonna disclaim anything. Just so you know, underneath all this, there's a bitterness brewing. Okay, but back at the time when we were innocent and we truly believed in his voice as a feminist. He has this charity that he works with and works for, and his mother was one of the people who started it, and that's Equality Now. Equality Now is a very worthwhile charity. It aims to help women and girls all around the world, specifically third world countries, to get education and to better their situation so they can make better lives for themselves, but they just don't have the means. So that's what this charity is all about. That's very important, very worthwhile. And Joss Whedon was always an advocate for that charity. And so every time there was an opportunity for fans to, put their money where their mouth is, he would say, just if you want to give money for this or that, just give it to this charity. And by doing that and by speaking about this charity and by showing his example, he created, I think, this state of mind, this it was part of the DNA of being a Whedon fan, okay, is the fact that you can take all that you have, all your love of the shows, all your enthusiasm for the fandom, and put it into good use, let's say. So it was like that from the very start. What happened later on was Firefly. Okay, we all know Firefly, I should hope. A very short-lived, abused by the network, Fox, show. Didn't make it past 13 episodes on air, and it was really one of the most brilliant shows of sci-fi that I've ever seen. It was beloved by many, and most of the fandom came after it was cancelled because of DVD sales and stuff like that. When it was cancelled, there was a big cry from the fans, and they started being active about it. So they started collecting money. They put an ad in Variety magazine. They organized a postcard writing campaign calling for more episodes, and all that is just to show you that that's just the beginning, where people start to get unionized and going together into what for them is a very big cause. And they raised over $14,000 to purchase Firefly DVDs to send them to sailors in every U.S. Navy ship. So there's Firefly in every ship. Okay?
Yeah, no, but this is cool because this is also like it's like a fandom oriented good deed. The deed itself is connected to the fandom.
Exactly, and it just started there, and it just got bigger and bigger. Like I said, the show was canceled, but the chatter about it just started growing and growing. People fell in love with it from the DVD sales, and they started showing it to each other, and it became like such a cult hit. And so, in a very weird twist of fate, it got green lighted for a movie, which never happens. There was a movie, Serenity, which started a new wave of a fandom, and people started to meet each other at what they called the fans of the show and the movie are called browncoats. Okay, call themselves browncoats after the people who fought in the war in the movie, in the show. And they started hosting this browncoats shindig, another word from the movie. And all these were towards raising money for charities. Okay, so they started with pop quizzes, small stuff. It got bigger and bigger. They started hiring out cinemas, and there was this whole group. I think it's still going. It's Can't Stop the Serenity annual event. I think they're still doing it.
Oh, nice.
I think it's been 15 years. How long has it been? Oh my God, I feel old. Oh my God.
Must be. Buffy just celebrated 20, so
yeah, I think it's been 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. So they're still doing it. They're still raising money. Can't Stop the Serenity was in 47 cities around the world. The world, okay? Not just the US. And altogether, since 2006, they raised over $1.2 million.
That's insane, yeah.
That's insane amount of money, and the proceeds went primarily to Equality Now, and some of it went to other causes that are more local in the places where the shindigs were happening. Also very much in the spirit of Equality Now and feminism and stuff like that. So that is amazing. The Firefly fans in general did things that are amazing. If you think about it,
and that's like when the internet was still kind of like,
yeah,
like
not
imagine
very
if they would have gathered now,
right?
Yeah,
we didn't have the power of the internet behind us. There was no social networking the way it is now, but we still went out, did those things, and I'm saying we because in Israel we also had browncoats, and we were vocal.
Yeah, fans know how to find each other. That's the amazing thing. They always knew how to find each other.
Yeah, and the thing is that it kind of goes hand in hand. We fight for our right to have this show on the air. That didn't work, okay? We got a movie. We fought for our right to see the movie. And then from that came charity. And just one more thing about in Israel, for example, the movie was supposed to come to theaters. We were in contact with the distribution company because of translation. They wanted to know how to translate certain words and stuff. So they were in contact with the fans, and
which, by the way, it's amazing on its own. Like you're saying it like it's a like it's a no-brainer. But the fact that the fans are big enough of a deal, so the distributor, while translating, is contacting you guys to be like, you
Yeah.
know, the ones who decides like how this is gonna be translated. That's pretty huge.
I guess.
I think so. You know, it's giving the power to the fans.
I have a word that I made up as a translation to a skiff in the war. There was this weapon called a skiff in the show. So when the person that translated it was asking the fandom how to translate certain words, that I came up with a word for that in Hebrew. So yeah, did my thing. So what I'm saying is, it was supposed to come out at the last minute. They said, "Listen, we're not releasing the film because it was supposed to." It wasn't such a big success. Okay, it was I think it was 80 million to make. By the way, when you watch it, it looks amazing. Doesn't look like it was made for 80 million. And it only brought back 40 million or something like that, which was not good. And so that's how it died. So the Israeli distributors decided not to bring it here, but we're going insane because that was not going to happen. And we fought it, and we went to meetings. I remember I was in design school at the time, and I remember going in the middle of class, leaving class in the middle to go handle it. So the crisis. We went to meet them, and we basically said to them, listen, we're going to bring you the people. We are going to put asses in the seats. You don't have to worry. We'll fill those theaters. And eventually what we worked out with them is that they gave us one in Tel Aviv, the major city. We got one theater, quite a big one. And they said, we're going to keep showing this movie for as long as you sell the tickets. So they pretty much put the whole ticket sale thing on us. But that's what we did. We just kept telling the fans, this is, you can watch Serenity, come over to Tel Aviv. Then we did it in other cities. But that was like such a huge thing. For us, it was everything. People came from all over the country to watch the movie, to sing the songs, to be shocked and awed, to meet other fans that they only, knew about from internet. It was like a celebration. For them, it was a business deal that they were trying to make the best of because they already put some money into translation. Okay? So, I don't know why I told the story.
No, but this is an example of how your activism was working for the fandom.
I don't know if that's activism. We didn't do anything to better the world. But it's...
if the word activism comes from being I don't know. It's like you band together for a common goal that you can say was the greater good. People deserve to see Serenity. So,
absolutely. Such a good movie. Yeah. So that's the whole thing with the Joss Whedon fandom. And that brings me to another thing that I think is amazing that has to do with that. Do you remember the Writers of America strike in 2000?
As a writer, I very much do. I mean, not in the union, but I remember the whole thing for sure. This is what brought us Dr. Horrible, and it was just prevented again a few months ago. So it's very much, people very much brought it back, talked about it again, because it was a huge strike.
Well, it was 10 years ago. Can you believe that? That's insane. I cannot believe it. It feels like it was yesterday. I don't know what the hell is going on with time, but 10 years ago, Writers of America union decided to strike. They were protesting against all sorts of things. We're not going to get into that. You can read about it. It's fascinating to some people. But the thing is, what it means when all the writers go on strike, it means that there is no TV. No one's writing episodes for the producers to produce, for the actors to act in. There's no TV. All those shows that we were watching were just stopped.
Yeah, it's an industry.
Can you imagine a world? Yeah, exactly. They had a lot of power, but nobody would give them anything for it. So they showed it, and And so it was a very big strike, went on for a few weeks. And so there was no television at the time. But the thing that's interesting about it is how much of fans and cast and crew of shows rallied around the writers to support, and they started organizing. And one of the first things that happens is Fans for Writers. It's kind of like a group of people that started organizing. I think that website is still up. If you go to Fans for Writers, I think it's still there. That started from the Joss Whedon fan base. Okay? Joss was one of the people leading the picket. All his actors, all his people were supporting, and the fans came in droves. And again, the fandom for Joss Whedon is insane. There already were activists, like I said before. It was in the DNA of the fandom already. If something bothers you, you're gonna act, you're gonna rally, you're gonna organize, and you do something about it. So they started to support in small ways and big ways. First thing that happened is they started bringing food for the picket lines, okay? Because the people were picketing all day. So they started raising money just to get a ton of pizzas delivered to the writers picketing, and drinks, for them to drink, and just taking care of them in the most basic way, to show them that they are with them in the most basic way.
I think it's beautiful.
I mean, it's
again,
beautiful.
Like we're kind of debating yesterday, and we're debating with the Serenity earlier whether or not it's activism. But I think
that is
activism is.
I think this
any sort of bending together as a group of people to for something bigger than you that is important. And I'm very much aware of how writers are probably, they get paid such a little amount of money, considering you cannot tell a story without a storyteller. And it's just beautiful what you're describing of how fans recognize that, and not only recognize that but came to support in more ways than one.
Yeah. And also I think that's activism, because that's a political thing. The whole thing is very political, to show your support for the writers and the union against the big studios and the money makers, instead of the people who make the art, let's just say, okay?
Yeah.
And
I think it's also acknowledging this, I want to consume the thing that you're creating.
Exactly.
I'm recognizing that I don't deserve it for free.
Yeah.
We're
not going to be upset with you because you shut our shows down. We're going to support you because we understand your plight, and we understand how this is important. Now listen to this, because I think you're going to like it.
Yes.
Other than the actual writers picketing, there were also a bit of fan pickets going on in different places. And one of the big ones in 2008, in the beginning of the year, just across of the studios in Burbank of NBC, fans of the show Xena started gathering, and they had one of the biggest pickets. And that show was stopped in 2001. Okay, it wasn't on the air anymore, so they were not supporting even their own people. They were just supporting the cause. And to think that this was 7 years after the show has ended, they were still united enough to say, we're going to go and do this. And they went and did this. And producers, actors, people from the crew of the show, Xena, joined them. And it was this whole thing.
Ah, that's so nice. I wonder if I knew that, because it sounds vaguely familiar, but it tells you also something about their fandom, which, Xena fans, we know they last forever. But the fact that 7 years later they were still in touch enough to put together, organize that way. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And they were, essentially they had no stake in it, but they did, because like I said, it's political. And they also brought food and water for the picket line, so they were thinking very practical.
I mean, yeah, let me tell you, you do see these things more often in LGBTQ fandoms, or, like show fandoms that has those ships, because I think like LGBTQ people are so used to like being political and on a constant,
Yeah.
A fight for like a better world, that that's also why the show resonates with them to begin with, and this is also why you hear them more, because, this is just the reality of things.
Yeah, I think you're very right.
Xena is, it's one of these shows. It definitely had this sort of following.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew we were gonna like it.
Yeah.
So, I have one more little Firefly tidbit to share. This is kind of like on the verge of good fandom turning into a bit questionable fandom practices.
Oh no.
Yeah, Firefly fans never gave up the hope that there's going to be another season, another movie. We're still kind of hanging in there and still thinking, because the cast and Whedon, the creator, are always so loving with each other, and they're always saying, if this was possible, I'd do it tomorrow. In 2011, something very surprising happened, because the actor that played the lead role, Mel Reynolds, Nathan Fillion, that we all know and love, kind of jokingly made an offhand comment that he said that if he won the lottery, he would buy Firefly rights and film a new show for an online broadcast. Well, I don't think he meant it seriously, and obviously it was just kind of a offhand thing that people say. And a guy called Jeremy Visca immediately opened this Facebook page called Help Nathan Buy Firefly, and it took off like crazy. People joined it and immediately started actively trying to pursue this thing and raise money. It had 100,000 followers. Okay. And Visca says that he just wanted to increase awareness of the fact that there is demand and people still want it. It didn't really mean for this to happen, but the campaign actually gained $1 million worth of pledges from fans in under a month. Under a month, $1 million were, for all intents and purposes, raised for this crazy cause. So that kind of shows you how eager the fans are, one, to see their show back, and two, they're just ready to go if you need them to put money money where their mouth is.
What did they do with the money?
$1
million.
I'll tell you, hold on. Well, it was just pretty much shut down by you could say by Joss himself, through his sister-in-law Marissa Tatrone. Remember we talked about her. She just tweeted, guys, no one in the Whedonverse is supporting Help Nathan Buy Firefly. This is not, please save your money, is what they said. This is not canon. Basically.
Yeah, but like $1 million were already raised. What the hell did they do with it? Did they just
it was pledges. It was pledges. Nobody really got money. And there was the guy that started it says he was a bit disappointed to see that, all this momentum. The fans wanted to do this amazing thing, and there was no interest in the other side. So, but he says, I guess we don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not good to go, because if it was possible, they would maybe do it. So. Yeah. It's not about that. So,
no, teach us a celebrity a lesson about making jokes.
Yeah, don't make jokes. And the guy says, I think that Nathan Fillion was taken aback because he didn't mean it like that, and he didn't mean for all this craziness to happen. So eventually, Visca said to his Facebook followers, just put it towards causes that's supported by Fillion, including Equality Now. You were gonna put your money in this, just put it somewhere else where it can do good. And that's it.
They're the Whedon fans, yeah. What can you do?
Yeah, they're so sassy.
do have a few more examples maybe to conclude. So shortly speak about a couple more fandoms, and they're like established activist groups. I found beautiful last year when I was in New York City Comic Con. Last year, again, to clarify, because we just did this episode. I went to a panel called, I think it was Fans for Good, or like Activism in Fandom. And that way I learned about a few organizations, kind of blew my mind. So, Supernatural, which is not one of my fandoms. I am sad to admit I haven't watched a single episode.
Don't be sad.
Don't be sad.
You can always watch it if you want.
At some point, I guess it's only, 1,000 seasons?
1,000 seasons.
So, Misha Collins, who's one of the lead cast of Supernatural, back in 2009, he, like we mentioned earlier, call for action. He tried to gather fans on Twitter. And again, see, we were already seeing the huge difference, because 2009, it's like, what? 9 years ago? No, I can't do math. Oh my god, it's like 8 years ago. It's 8 years ago, but it was, I
wasn't even trying. Just left you there.
It's like, it's new enough that he could use Twitter to do something like that, and this goes to show you how meaningful social media, like what a part social media plays in all of that. So he called his fans over Twitter to sort of try and gather together to get some sort of like a government funding to all sorts of different socially relevant projects. Now, they didn't manage, because once they started working, they realized it would actually be much better to just establish a privately owned nonprofit, which nowadays is known as Random Acts. There's a website, Random Acts, and a few weeks after they started, trying to like gather people, it was when the huge earthquake in Haiti. Do you remember that?
Of course.
Yeah. And they managed to collect $30,000 for UNICEF. And that was basically like the first time, that they've actually done something. And I'm sure, kind of like encourage them to continue. Because again, today they're a very active website. They have ongoing projects. And they have like specific little projects in addition to like big ones. So one of the things that I saw was really cute was they bought new cameras for the NICU in a hospital in Iowa. Oh. And it's really interesting, because we think about the NICU, it's preemies. So like, sadly, some of them pass away, and so the parents and the families, the only memories they have is cameras from the NICU. Or some of them are sick, so they can't have visitors, so families can get their pictures in the NICU and show family members. And some of them, those of them who actually grow up and survive, they hit a lot of milestones while in the NICU, certain weight, first whatever. Oh, wow. And so I was like, it's a lot of things you don't even think about. I was like, oh, that's such a sweet thing to do. So that was really cool thing. And they're supporting an animal sanctuary in Florida. And they have projects, we're talking locals, but they have projects in Cameroon and Nicaragua. And they're doing all sorts of like, different areas and different like fields all around the world, and like I said, things that are more ongoing and things that are more specific. And that fandom is like so strong, because that charity has a bit of like a spin-off charity which like I'm very purposely saying spin-off, because they there's another it's sort of like living on social media. It's called Wayward Daughters. And I think it's interesting. It's two women who kind of like came together to support a female supernatural spin-off, and to support that. I know, right? And fandom is amazing. And they opened social media accounts for that thing, Wayward Daughters, to Twitter and Tumblr, to support specifically, like gather people who would support that idea. But through that, they became a sort of movement. Like, if you look at Twitter, they have more than 18,000 followers. And, they became some sort of like this thing that promotes women representation on Supernatural and on media in general, because that's, the thing that was in their hearts. And if you go and look at their social media accounts, you'll see most of the things they post are, women empowerment stuff. And unsurprisingly, they're working with Random Acts, which is like which is Misha's charity that we mentioned earlier. So actually this year they sold more than 10,000 shirts, like Wayward Daughters shirts, and all of, the earnings, they went to this organization called New Leash on Life. And I read about it yesterday, and it's actually amazing. It's this organization that trains shelter dogs, so that are in danger and of being put down. They're training them, and by that giving them a new chance. But it's even cooler than that, because it happens in prisons. So what also happens is they're teaching inmates to become dog trainers. And so the dogs get a second chance. The prisoners are getting some sort of like a profession, or something to maybe do, or and just work with animals. So that's really beautiful. And they're like, that good for you, Supernatural fandom. Like, this is big. This is amazing.
That's exciting.
It's really exciting. And one other fandom that we have mentioned before, but not in the activism sense, is the Harry Potter fandom. And that's another organization that's amazing, called the Harry Potter Alliance. And they also have a website. And they don't necessarily choose like one thing to be their goal. They're generally socially positive. So, part of it was just like we mentioned earlier, but they sent supplies to Haiti, like they, after the earthquake. They are now gathering people to sign a petition for net neutrality, which we haven't spoken earlier, so maybe we'll conclude with that. People donated hundreds and hundreds of books, for libraries and stuff. They start new campaigns all the time. And one of the current campaigns is called A World Without Hermione. And I think you would actually really like that one. It's the idea is kind of like, the world of Hogwarts in Harry Potter could not exist without the women of Harry Potter, the amazing cast of women characters in Harry Potter. Same goes for our world. And so that campaign is meant to kind of like, decrease the gap between, or like, strive for more equality between men and women in education. So they're working with this organization called She's the First. It's an organization that's supposed to help women to actually make it to graduation. So they're collecting donations for that as well. And that's really just tip of the iceberg. They have grants, they have fellowships, and they have what they call chapters, but like, branches all around the world. Like, I saw one in Tel Aviv, but I couldn't, like, I tried to Google a bit about it, but I actually didn't find much. But
interesting.
Really all over. They're fighting for LGBT equality. I think that unlike random acts, or like the difference, and we talked about like fandom oriented activism before, is that they kind of keep their Potter niche in terms of marketing. See, like the campaign is called A World Without Hermione, and the net neutrality campaign has to do with Neville's name, so and I think they kind of like also adopted the Hunger Games into that, but but it's amazing. So I think it's definitely worth a shout out about. I don't think you can talk about fandom activism without mentioning these two groups.
Very cool.
It's pretty amazing. I think we're pretty much done, but since we mentioned net neutrality, I would like to say a sentence or two about how it can affect fandom. So I don't know how many people around the world are aware. The FCC, which is an organization, like a government, I think they're a government agency here in the US, they're about to vote about net neutrality in a couple of weeks, I believe. And people are very worried because what it actually means. Go watch John Oliver; he will explain to you. But it's kind of like internet providers will be able to break down your internet subscription into like packages. So let's say you're very social media oriented, so you will need to buy the social media package that, let's say, will include Twitter and Facebook. But maybe because Tumblr is not as crazy, they will, I don't know, include it in their premium package. So you need another package for Tumblr. So like the whole point is like the way you consume content on the internet right now, it would not be the same. And they will have the authority to kind of like forward your information to any other company that wants it if you're their subscriber. I've seen some really interesting...
Crazy.
It's insane. It's mind-blowing.
It's like going back in time. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like we are just going back and back, further and further, instead of forward. It's unbelievable.
The world is depressing.
So discouraging.
Yeah, but I read a few posts on Tumblr about how it will affect fandom, and I found it really interesting. And then people were saying, like, what I'm saying, like, if now you're consuming, Tumblr constantly, do you like fan fiction? Great. A website like Archives of Our Own, which is, privately funded by fans, will probably have a really hard time with internet providers, because they would also be able to slow how long it takes to load a page. And since they're not making any money out of Archives of Our Own, they will have no interest to give it an easy pass. So that's fan fiction. If you like edits, if you like gifs / nobody knows, but if you like all of those stuff that you would see on Tumblr, gifs, I support gifs. Some people do. I'm not making this
I don't
up.
care about them.
I don't care. They're not my friends. They're not my problem.
No.
Yeah, but so as a heavy Tumblr user, especially for that sort of content, Tumblr will be a part of a whole other package that you will need to acquire. Not many people, not necessarily everybody, will be able to afford it. Same goes for fan art. All these websites like Redbubble or DeviantArt. So all these things there is a huge potential that they will cost more money, and and I mean, we talked about the fact that fans put their money into their fandoms, but this is gonna be crazy, and people are saying don't be fooled. This is gonna be affecting people outside of the US as well, because at the end of the day you go through servers into the US. Yeah, so it's not just an American problem, and I'll put the link to that post, because I thought it was a really interesting read about how fandom legit can suffer from these changes. And we just raved so many times in the past and today about what a huge part social media plays in the way fandom looks today. So I just hope we're not on the verge of a really, really negative change that will change our experience as fans as well,
Yeah, that really is ominous. What can I say?
Ugh. Yeah, so that was my 50 cents on that.
Okay. Call your congressman. I don't know. What do you do?
I can't vote. I can't do anything.
Congressman, your congresswoman.
I can do
Not
it.
you. The listeners were actually.
Yeah. There's a text bot that makes it easier for people, and you basically texting a certain word to a certain number, and it does all the calling to your congressman for you. Again, it's gonna be in the link. So if this is close to your heart, as it should be, and you can actually vote, I recommend
do it.
Voicing your concerns. Be an activist fan. What a way to
close the show.
Yeah.
Well, that was depressing, but also hopeful, as always.
As always.
Yeah, the world of fandom is amazing. Whatever happens, there will always be fandoms. There will always be fanfiction. We manage with fanzines. We're gonna manage like this.
Yeah, like we said, fans have ways of finding each other.
Exactly.
Fandom will prevail.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What do you recommend?
What do I recommend? Well, Runaways. Watch Runaways. Oh, you know what's back? Podcast favorite Janet Varney with a new season of Stan vs. Evil.
Yes. Okay.
Always a treat. And I mean, we can't go an episode without mentioning Janet, so there we go.
We're not going to even try. Well, thank you guys for listening. You know where to find us. All our links are at the About page, in our Tumblr, Random Fandom Pod. And we'll see you next show. Bye.